Great. Welcome everybody to our first of our immediate immersion Webversity. I see we've got 30 people on board right now. That's excellent. Hopefully it won't take us too long to get through the introduction stuff, but this is a good one to test out if everything's working okay, if your internet's working, your sound's working, and all of that, so we can get the kinks worked out before we get into the nuts and bolts of everything. So just to familiarize everybody, you'll be able to see me along the side here, and then you'll have the PowerPoint that you can see here, and then most of you figured out there's the chat box where you can type in questions if you have any along the way. And while we do that, bear with me a second while I increase the font size of that so I can read it better. Okay, great. So this is our first class tonight. This is my first day of school. I just got out of school and my first day with kids today, so it's been a little bit hectic, but I made it. Let's go ahead and get started. Tonight is going to be introduction to the program itself plus the curriculum. So first of all, let's talk about why that we do the Webversity. The main reason it's one skill at a time. Many of you have taken various workshops or even conferences where it's piled of information upon piled information, and you can barely remember one or two things to take back to your classroom. It's the nature of the beast. When you go to a workshop, it's 1, 2, 3 days, a conference maybe a week, so they want to give you your money's worth. Hello, Carla. But at the same time, so much is getting crammed to you that you can't really remember everything that you want to. Even if you take notes, it's usually one or two things that stand, in your head to come back and bring to class. So when I envisioned this many years ago, I don't know how many years I've been doing this for, 5, 6, maybe 7 years now. It was envisioned that we take care of one skill at a time. So each class is dedicated to one, maybe two if they're small topics. And that way you can go back to, hello Madeline, hi Annie, that you can go back to your classroom and actually practice that, put it in place so that you don't have 2 or 3 or 5 or 6 things to think about. You've only got the one that comes from the one skill at a time. So that is one of the benefits of it. Because that traditional workshops just cram way too much info in too short of a time period. And by us focusing on only one skill, participants have their one thing that they can take back to their classroom. And you get the time to implement in your classroom. Now, the first few classes I'm doing weekly only because a lot of you are getting ready to start or have already started, so you need to get some information so that you can take back to your classroom. But once we get started, it'll be meeting once every other week. So with an average of the 2 weeks that we do have between classes, you have time to actually put into practice what you've learned. You have time to reflect on it, to ask questions, because you can come back here and either email me questions, you can participate on our discussion board with questions, or you can wait till the next class and you can ask us your questions live. You're going to get your first email tonight after the class once the recording is set, and it's going to be a one-page link. That link you want to bookmark. You bookmark the link. It's the same link all year long, and the password is Bentley, capital B-E-N-T-L-E-Y. That will get you access to all of the recordings. We ask that you don't share that with anybody. It's just for this group. But you'll have access to all the recordings up through September of 2017 next year. And once you get to this main menu page, you can click on each week's as they come. Obviously, there's nothing there now, and there won't be until after tonight. But each week will add more, so they'll all be there. But when you click on the link for each individual class, it will start with the video. It'll have any demo videos if there are any of those. It'll also have any handouts if you didn't get the handout in the email. There wasn't a handout for tonight. And then at the bottom is a little discussion area where, just like on Facebook or in blogs, you can start or add to a discussion. You can add questions. You can tell us your successes or your challenges or your concerns. We want to encourage that discussion there so that we can all participate and have like a little professional learning community going on. And we can all benefit from everybody's experience. We all have something to share, or sometimes you have ideas that nobody else has thought of. You'll get your personal support from not only the peers through this discussion board or through questions while we're here on live, but also you're welcome to email me at scott@teachforjune.com at any time, and I'll do my best to answer you as quickly as I can. And get your questions answered for you. If it's a really good question, I'm going to write it down, and then I'm going to include it in next week's class so that other people can benefit from that question. The support is always close at hand. As I said, you've got the live, you've got the discussion board, and then you've got the email. And there's my email address if anybody wants to jot it down. And remember, I am a full-time teacher, so I usually won't answer during the day unless it's during my lunch period. But I usually get back to most people within 24 to 48 hours. I do my best to try. I spend about an hour and a half after school answering emails. And again, you can use that post-class discussion to ask questions of your peers or of me, or to share anything on there. That's what it's for. It's for us to all come together as a professional learning community to be able to learn from each other. This will help your fellow participants, allowing everyone to benefit from your questions and answers. So it's great when they're there or when you can share them live. You can't always do that, so you can email me. That's great. But if I see if it's a really good question or I think it applies to many people, I'm going to either post it on the discussion board or talk about it on the next class so that we can get some information on that. Plus, you may trigger any further thoughts and ideas that may otherwise have never been discovered. Last year was one of our best classes. We had the most people involved, and we had quite a few people live every night from around the world. And people had some really, really good thought-provoking questions that led on to other ideas. So I hope we get that kind of a thing going this year. This year, I will say, we are double the enrollment from last year, so I'm quite excited with that. And so hopefully all of our great minds coming together, that we can come up with some new ideas, some new thoughts. Kelly says, come on, group, we can totally beat last year's group. Last year, was the first time that I had international people participate live. Usually international people will just watch the recordings because the times don't work, but I had a guy from Persia. He was on live every once in a while. He had some illness issues, so he wasn't always able to come on live. But then we had Inga, and I don't see her on here, but there's so many I can't see everybody's name right now. Inga from Russia, and she's back with us this year, but usually she's 12 hours behind us, so she has to get up like at 4:30 a.m. to be able to watch. And Beatriz is participating from Spain, 1:30 in the morning. Great for you to be with us, Beatriz. That's some die-hardness there. So we have this private members-only discussion, which again, I'll give you that link tonight. It was in your welcome email as well, but just in case, bookmark it so you have it. And that's the private members-only discussion. We can discuss there. It doesn't go out to the world. It's just for us, so you can feel free within our class to discuss what you want to discuss. And that post-class discussion is an excellent place to engage with me and the other participants. We're all in different places. We have Beatriz, she's in Spain, Inga is in Russia, people from all the different states around the country. But one place we can all come together, if we're not coming together here live, is also on that discussion board, so we can share a lot of great ideas. And you can add other ideas, other things that you're thinking about on there. Questions that you have, successes, challenges, anything really. It's a discussion board for us to use as we see fit. Here's the address. Again, I will send it out again tonight, but it's https secure //teachforjune.com/IIW for immediate immersion Webversity, and it's the 2016 edition, so 2016. And then the password is Bentley, and it stays the same the whole year long. Sorry, there's a pesky fly. As I've said, all episodes are recorded, which is another benefit. When you go to a workshop, if you miss something, you miss something. You go to the bathroom, it's gone. You can't get it back. Here, all of the classes are recorded, and you can have access to watch them, re-watch them, watch them for the first time because you couldn't attend live, re-watch them, go back to a point just to see one little thing that you might have missed. They're all there for you. So that's another benefit of being able to do this way. You can watch them whenever you want. You don't always have to participate live, or you can participate live and then re-watch them later to get more information. And you'll get that email with a link after every episode, every class. It takes a little bit of while because I have to wait for them to finish the video, and then I have to wait for them to download it, and then I upload it, and usually within an hour or so after the class you'll get a notice for that. And you'll be available to watch the videos up through the end of September of 2017, so you have a little bit more than a year. So it's also, you go through it this school year, but then you want to review yourself next school year, you can watch them all over again during the summer. There's no limit to how many times you can watch them. You can watch them as many times as you like. I know my department, we watch them, and then we have discussions in our PLCs about them as well. And what's great about the recordings, it is perfect if you can't make a class live or you want to review. I mean, some of you have back to school nights coming up, or conferences with your own children or with your students, or other obligations, and so that's great that they are ready. You can watch those when you need to. When we start every new class, we're going to debrief. If you have any successes or challenges or any questions about anything that's happened in the last 2 weeks between classes, we start the class that way. And then, so if you, going ahead of myself, sorry. So then if you do have any of these, try to make a note of them so when I ask, that you can bring them to the table when we do it live. So any challenges, successes, takeaways, aha moments, anything you'd like to share with us. You can review all content, recorded classes, and discussions again through September of 2017. And that's the nutshell of the class itself. Any questions about the class before we go on to the actual curriculum? Okay, I don't see any questions coming up. Great. So some of you purchased the immediate immersion curriculum and some of you haven't. It's not required to do this course. Alyssa says, how long is each segment? Usually between an hour to 2 hours, depending on the content and the questions. Tonight I don't think will be a 2-hour one, but it could be if people ask a lot of questions. Sometimes we run over that 2 hours, but I want to respect your time, so I'll cut it off, and I may schedule an extra class to cover the time that we went over because of some really good questions that happened a couple of times last year. We've already added this year, last year's was only 20 classes. And a couple years ago we were at 12, but people wanted more, so I added 8 more classes. But when I was scheduling this year, I came up with 4 additional classes, so we're up to 24, an average of 2 hours each. But sometimes it's a little bit less, sometimes it's, it doesn't go more. We may have to make an extra class though if it does. Great question, Elisa, thank you. So again, about the materials, it's not required. This is a class that is going to not only just teach you about TPRS, comprehensible input methodology, grading and assessment, but it works hand in hand with the curriculum, but they're not connected necessarily. You can do obviously CI or TPRS with another curriculum, with a textbook, but those who have the curriculum, it makes it a little bit easier because we talk about it a little bit as we go along and relate, oh, this is where this shows up in the curriculum, what we're talking about right now. So it does go hand in hand for you. So let's talk about each component because some people get confused because there's a lot of stuff in there. So let's start with the teacher's manual. That is the nuts and bolts. I mean, it gives you all the information that you need is in that there. So you want to start there first. Some people like having it concrete and print it out, but it's like almost 300 pages in some editions. So it's a lot of paper to print out. If you want to be my guest, I didn't do it that way. I just prefer to print out what I actually need. So I'll print out a lesson plan, and then I print out maybe a story script, but I don't need to print out everything in between. It's a lot. But some people like to. I know in my school we use my curriculum, and the teachers at my school like to print it out and put it in a binder. If that's what works for you, that's great. I prefer to do it digitally and save a tree. Or in this case, it's a lot of trees. In the teacher's manual, you'll find detailed information on how to use the curriculum. There is a how-to. Everything's in there. And whenever something new comes up in a lesson, there is an explanation in the teacher's notes about it. I don't explain everything every lesson because obviously if you've done it all, you don't need to I don't need to rewrite it again. The manual will be, 600, 800 pages long. You can always go back to the place where it first was introduced, and then they'll have that in there. But it's got all the information how to use the curriculum. How to TPRS is in there. So it gives you the basics on how to do TPRS. There's information on what a typical TPRS week looks like, both for traditional classes where you're teaching, 5 days a week, or for block schedules. It kind of lets you know what kind of activities you'll be doing to kind of give you a framework. Does it always have to be that way? Absolutely not, but it gives you somewhere to start. It gives you a list of essential TPRS skills. You may be on the Facebook group, you may be on more TPRS group, or we have our own Facebook group. If you're not aware, Immediate Immersion, just do a search for group under the Facebook groups for Immediate Immersion, and you can request to join that group. And it's another place where we discuss not only this class but the curriculum. But if there's someone brings up a TPRS term that you may not have heard of before, likely it's defined in the manual. Most of the TPRS skills are with an explanation of what it is and some ideas about it. How to use teacher scripts. I always butcher her name, so I'm not even going to say it. I think it's Matvia or something. I butcher her name and I apologize to her. But we use these types of scripts in there. So the story is actually completely written out. We don't recommend that you use it exactly as written, however, because that's storytelling and we want to do more story asking. But what it has in there, it's written in there, the whole story, and then it's got things that are underlined and things that are bold. Those that are bold are the targeted structures for that lesson, so you don't want to change those. And your circling questions, your scaffolded, differentiated questions should really focus on those structures. Then there are underlined sections, and those are sections where you're going to allow your kids to give you ideas. There is an idea already there in case they can't come up with anything better, but you want to try to solicit. So they might say, there is a girl, but girl is underlined. It doesn't have to be a girl. So you can ask your class, well, class, what was there? And they say there's a rock. So now where girl appears in the script, you're going to change it to rock all the way through. It does explain this in the manual, but that's the gist of it. It has a basic set of classroom procedures. One of the greatest successes of starting your school and keeping your classroom running throughout the year is procedures. It took me about 4 or 5 years in my teaching career to understand that. I remember when I started teaching at high school, they gave me Harry Wong's book, and I read it, but I thought, I teach high school, this seems all very elementary-ish, and I didn't think it applied to me. How wrong was I? Procedures start every class, they continue to go through the class, they end every class. So I have a set of basic classroom procedures that I use in my classroom, and it's not an exhaustive list, but if you don't have a procedure for these, you might want to think about that or think up one of your own for these types of things. The more procedures you have and the more you train your kids to do the procedures, the better your class runs throughout the year. I mean, elementary teachers will tell you that's the key to success, but it doesn't just apply to elementary, it applies to middle school and high school and even college as well. You may not have as many procedures as you get older, but you do have procedures. And when you teach a procedure, you actually have to teach it, not just tell them what it is. You need to practice it, not just in the beginning of the school year, but throughout the school year as well, especially after breaks. There's also a variety of classroom activities. We need other activities to keep it novel in the classroom. And there's a whole list of these in the manual. We'll talk about them coming, I don't know, it's about halfway through our lessons. We'll be talking about some of these classroom activities in class, but there's a whole list of them that you can use right from the teacher's manual. There's a list of brain breaks. These are absolutely, positively necessary if you teach on the block. On the block, at the very minimum, you need to do one of them in the middle. But honestly, when I taught on the block, we have modified block at my school. So on the days we do have block, I try to do at least 2 of them. So I break my class, the block is roughly about an hour and a half. So I break up my class into, 3 30-minute segments. And in those in between is my little commercial break, my brain break. And there's a list of these in here. Again, it's not an exhaustive list. Feel free to, think of other ones. What I like to do is I take a little recipe box and I make index cards with labels of my different brain breaks that I find or that are in the curriculum. And then I'll just pull a random one out of a hat out of that card box to use that one day. That way it kind of keeps them random and the kids don't know which one's coming and I don't have to really think and plan it out. I know how to do them all. I just pull which one out and that's the one we're going to do today. One of the favorite ones, and these don't have to be elaborate. These can be like from 1 minute to 5-minute activities. But one of the favorite ones my kids love, and it's the dumbest one ever, is dead fish. And I don't even know where I found this one, but it was popular with not just me. A lot of teachers who do this found it very popular. And it's great for the teacher because you have the kids, they wobble around, they move around the classroom, they flip and flop like they're fish, and then all of a sudden you say dead fish in the target language, and they fall to the ground and they're dead. They can't move, they can't talk, they can't do anything. The kids like it because they get like a minute and a half, 2 minutes of like nap time, and they just sit there dead on the floor. I'm thinking, ooh, it's a little brain break for me. I come, check my email real quick, sit down for a second, get a rejuvenation, and then I can start back up again. But the kids really, really like that one, and I have no idea why. Emily says, that's hilarious. It is. They love that one. I don't know why they love that one, but it's great for me because it gives me a little bit of break where I don't have to be on for, 2 minutes. I set the timer for just 2 minutes and let them be quiet for 2 minutes. They can't move, they can't talk, they can't do anything. Yeah, Elisa says they love it because it's so silly. It must be, but I've done that in high school and they love it. Seniors flop on the floor and then die. It's great. Courtney says, is the floor optional? Can they be dead in desks if they're grossed out by the floor? I'm sure you can modify it as you need. We have another one called freeze frame where it works very similarly, but they're standing, they're not on the floor. My kids, no matter how gross my floor is, they have no problems getting on that floor. I don't know why. Shannon says maybe they love it in the same way that the child pose is my favorite pose in yoga. Very true. Could be very well. Esther says our floor is disgusting also. I think it's a prerequisite to be a school floor. It must be disgusting. I mean, really, the poor custodians can't keep up. They clean it, maybe once good in the summertime, and then maybe one other time during the school year. So, think about that and all the traffic that comes in. In our school, our custodians are so overworked. We're on a 3-day schedule, so our classes only get a thorough cleaning every 3 days, and it's not so thorough. It's a 10 or 15-minute vacuum and empty the garbage and dusting. That's how we get ours. So, yes, if you don't want to do the floor, that's perfectly fine. Most of my kids don't care. I tell them how gross the floor is, but they go on it right anyway. So on top of all that information, there's also individual lesson plans, and the lesson plans are written for both block and for traditional schedules. There's story scripts. There's how to implement each aspect of the lesson. So as I said, every time they introduce a new activity, there will be something in the teacher's notes that explain exactly what you're supposed to do. There'll be teacher tips to help you get through things a little easier. And at the end of every lesson, there is a set of flashcards. These I do print. I print them on cardstock, and then I cut them out with a paper cutter. I don't want to do it by hand because it would take much longer. And what I use them for is not really to flashcard my kids, because that doesn't really work, we know. Flashcards are like a treadmill. As long as you stay on the treadmill, they work fine, but the moment you get off, they start to dissipate. But what I use them for is when I'm making quizzes. Oh, we've gone over this word, we've gone over this word. I've got a pile of words that we've gone over, so I know I can add them to a quiz. Or if I want to practice TPR, total physical response, with my kids, I'll run through the cards this way and shuffle them up. And for me, I do use them like flashcards, the flashcard system, so I can review frequently. So I'll make 3 piles, the pile we're working on and need most frequent practice, another pile that the kids know like this, and I don't have to practice as frequently, maybe I practice it once a month, and then ones that they're not really easy for them, but they're not super hard yet either. They're kind of in that middle, and maybe I practice those maybe once a week or once every other week until they get so easy they can go in the once a month pile. Kathy says, it sounds like your book is useful even if you don't teach Spanish. Kathy, what language do you teach? It comes in French and Spanish both. And it does have a lot of other information. Oh, Catherine says Chinese. Sorry, that's one language I don't know. The instruction parts are in English, but unless you know another language or you know someone who knows another language, the story scripts that are not going to be as useful for you because they're going to be in the target language. And one of the benefits that makes us different than any other curriculum out there, Blaine started writing his in Spanish, which was fine. And Carol wrote hers in Spanish to start off with, which is fine, perfect. But the French and the German and the English versions of those books, Carol doesn't have a German, it's only Blaine who has a German. They're all great books and curriculums on their face, but the German, the English, and the French ones are translations of the Spanish, which kind of works for French, but not really. There are some things that are specific to French that don't apply in Spanish, and they don't get any practice in the stories because they are translated from the Spanish. And it's even worse for the German because German has a lot of idiosyncrasies that don't happen in Latin-based languages. So um, it's even less useful there. I understand why they did it that way. We took a different approach. I wrote the Spanish stories, and Rochelle Berry writes the French stories. I don't give her any guidance other than all of our stories are based off the most frequent words of the language. So in Chinese, Kathy, your frequent word list is going to be different than Spanish or French's. In French and Spanish, there's some commonalities, but there's still some very big differences. So she knows in level 1 she has to work at the top 100 words. Beyond that, she can write her stories or organize it any way that she wants. So her stories are not translated from the Spanish. And the same thing, we have a German one. It's still a work in progress because I'm having a hard time finding a German teacher. I think I may have found a new one who's going to start it up. It's only half done right now, but it's not a translation of the Spanish again. So for Kathy, if you have someone who speaks one of those languages, is a translation to Mandarin better than not having anything? Absolutely. But starting something from scratch that really applies and that hits all the Mandarin idiosyncrasies would work best. I know in Mandarin you just don't have a lot of materials. The only person I know who actively makes materials in Mandarin is Terry Waltz. Dana says, I have the French, can't wait to start using it. Kelly says, so Kathy, you just need to write some Mandarin stories for Scott. That's perfect, Kelly, that is. Yes, if we want to make it, if there is a need for Mandarin, it's probably more needful than German is right now. If you think that might be something you want to do, and Kelly goes, I get a finder's fee, right? I'm laughing right along with you, Kelly. If that's something you might want to do, it's a lot of work. It takes me a year to write one of these. It's a lot of work, how many stories go into it. But if you're interested, email me. We can talk about those things. So it has all this information, those flashcards, that's what I use them for, to keep track of for tests, what I've covered, and then to practice with my kids. Now, the teacher's manual is broken up into 4 units. The Spanish 2 is going through a rewrite right now. It's almost done, but not quite. So the older version is not written this way, but the newer version will be. The level 1 French and Spanish is written this way, and the level 2 of French that we're working on, we've had the first unit out, is written this way as well. Carla says, I'm actually thinking of writing stories and trying to get university credit for this class with the stories. Excellent, Carla. That would be excellent. So the teacher's manual is broken up into 4 units. So each unit is supposed to loosely resemble a high school quarter. I teach middle school right now. I used to teach high school for 12 years of my career. In the last 3 years, I've been in middle school. We have trimesters. So it doesn't really work, the 4 units doesn't really work for us. We don't even get through 3 of them. We only get through about 2 of them, the way our schedule works. But it's broken up into 4 units, and think of each unit as a quarter. However, do not think that that is a strict timeline. When I taught high school and I had more time in my classroom, most of the time I could get through a lesson in 1 week. I can't anymore. It takes me a minimum of 2 and sometimes 3 weeks to get through a lesson. So don't think that, I got to get to the end of the unit at the end of my quarter. Don't rush your students. Teach your students in front of you and not worry about that curriculum so much. They'll get a lot more if you slow down. So think about that. I know with us, we have about 2.5, 3 hours of contact time a week because of our wonky schedule. Courtney says, going back, I'm not looking at it. Are the flashcards pre-made? Yes, they're pre-made. Do you add important highish frequency words to the box of cards by class? In level one only, there's some extra ones like months and days of the week, but after that, it's just the ones that we focus on in the curriculum. There's no English translations because they're not meant to be used by the students. They're meant to be used by the teachers. And I'll show you what you can do for the students where the translations are there. Wendy, I don't know which edition you have, if you have the DVD or you're on the Google Drive, but if you're on the Google Drive, the files come after the folders, and they'll start with II for immediate immersion, dash, SP for Spanish, FR for French, DE for German, then the level 1 or 2, and then dash, and then will be the title of what it is, Teacher's Manual. Kelly says, I would add ones that come up, Courtney. Customize it for your kids. Yes, excellent idea, Kelly. Leave out ones you don't really use, even if they're ones Scott put on cards. Yes, that's very true. The ones that all the words that are on there, except for those introductory obligatory level 1 words, are the highest frequency words of the language. But let's be honest, sometimes the words just aren't used. I know when I went through Carol's curriculum, we would go through as a team and we would pick and choose, ooh, that word we don't want to teach, let's find another word for that. So feel free to do those kinds of things. So each unit is broken up into 3 chapters. Bear with me while I blow my nose here, excuse me. It's 3 chapters, and each chapter has 2 lessons. And as I said, they're written as a week lesson because some people get through them in a week. I do not. So don't feel that you have to. But each chapter has 2 lessons in it. The assessments come after each chapter. So after every even lesson, there is an assessment. Novels are suggested after each unit. I don't sell novels, I don't write novels, but I've listed some popular choices. Again, it's not an exhaustive list. Novels are coming out all the time. La Capara y las Botas is a brand new one that's not listed in the curriculum because it just came out this summer. And I have not even read it. It's on I have a whole bunch of books on my desk to start reading when I get a chance. When we start our, free voluntary reading time, I'll be reading some of these. But they're suggested. Do you have to do a novel after every unit? No. We only can fit in 2 novels a year. That's what we've committed to as a department. Esther says, how do you get funding for novels? We beg, plead, and borrow at our school. The good thing about our school is we're a new department. We just became IB officially last year. That's International Baccalaureate, for those who don't know, which is an international system of schools. It's a philosophy behind teaching. And so our program just started at the middle school 3 years ago. So because we're a new department and we had nothing, we've gotten more funds than on average. They're going to dry up. We know that. But that's the one thing. Yeah, you beg, plead, and borrow from your school. If you can't get it from your school, ask your PTC, your parent-teacher club. See if they can give you any funds. We get $100 a year per teacher that we can spend on any school stuff that we like. And we also have a PTC wish list that we can send in a wish list of things that we would like for our classroom that's beyond that $100. And PTC will vote and see if they can get that for us. The third way is donorschoose.org. That's a great way. That was just introduced. I've heard of it before, but it's been actively introduced to our school last year. And I was in the pilot program. I had to put up a particular campaign. I did for hats to use in skits in our stories in our classroom. And it got funded just before the school year started. So I should have my hats by next week. So it's about $200 worth of hats that I've gotten. So those are a couple of ways. And then I see some people here have got some ideas. Let me back up here because they scroll off my screen. Okay, there we go. So they're not that expensive. That's true. They're not, compared to something else, they're not. They're about, when you buy a class set, they run about $5 each. And just buy one class set. You keep them on your desks for your kids as they move through the day. Carla says try a GoFundMe. A GoFundMe is a more general where people can donate money, and Donors Choose is really specific to teachers. So a lot of companies will go ahead and sponsor some of those projects on Donors Choose to get those funded for schools. Lynn says, my librarians have funds that they will use to get books that teachers request, even class sets. So ask. There's nothing wrong with asking. The worst they can say is no. Oh, I thought of another way. We've done fundraisers. In Vegas, when I taught in Vegas, we had the California, well, it's not called that anymore. It's called the Creative Cookbook Company would come out and we would sell these cookbooks. They were cookbooks from home ec teachers around the country, and they had different themes. And I think the cookbooks went for like $10 each. They got $6, we got $4. We sold for a full week, and we made about $2,000 a year that the district couldn't touch because we fundraised for ourselves to get those. So we didn't use them just for books, we used them for other things as well. But that's another way to do that. Have a fundraiser for your kids. Esther says, that's what I thought, but I found some sources for online books. That's always a possibility. If you can find those, great. Dana says, I wrote a grant and was able to get novels for both our French and Spanish classes. It has made a huge difference in our classes. Excellent. Very good. Tammy also suggests Donors Choose. My school also has a foundation for grants. Excuse me. And there's a local regional foundation that I got a grant from. Grants are another great way to do that. I know we have certain grants that we can apply with our school district and try to get. Unfortunately, most of them are technology based, so novels wouldn't count. But try for something else. You never know. Courtney says if you do Donors Choose, you can add beanbag chairs and other environment stuff for the reading time. Yes, you can. As long as it gets into the hands of kids, Donors Choose will approve it. If it's something more that's only going to be for the teacher, it's less likely to get approved. Shannon says there's a website where teachers can put a wish list and then send a link and people can donate, but I don't remember the name of it. That sounds like Donors Choose, Shannon, because that's what Donors Choose does. It gives you links to put them on Twitter and Facebook that you can do that. TJ, she works in our district. Welcome, TJ. GoFundMe charges a percentage of your donation too. That is true. They take that out where Donors Choose. It does too. It has a little bit of a finance fee, but it's not as big as the GoFundMe does. I would stick with Donors Choose because it is more specific to teachers, number one, and number two, corporations actively look through there and find things to sponsor. And so you're more likely to get that than on a GoFundMe, because GoFundMe is more for people who need general things, like someone's passed away and they didn't have any life insurance and they need to be able to fund, the funeral, or they passed away unexpectedly like a young child. So that's what those are more likely, and corporations aren't as free with their money when it comes to things like that. And they do charge a high percentage. I think it's like 8%. Dana says, I got great advice. Oops, I missed it there. Great advice when writing for the grant. Use as many buzzword and education as possible. Even if you're not a fan of Common Core, use the buzzwords. Yes, that's true for anything that you want. Carla says, I wonder if Blaine will sell older versions of his books at a reduced price to get rid of the inventory. You can always ask. It doesn't hurt to ask. He just came out with revamped versions of many of his novels. I know I saw those. This summer, my principal, again, I'm very fortunate. We were at NTPRS. He gave each of us teachers $250 to spend on books. So I bought one of each book that was out there on the tables. and I saw some of those revamped ones from Blaine. So that's another thing. And I'm going to put out a plug for Carla. They have the first Midwestern conference coming up, and they are going to provide everybody a novel who registers for that. So that's one way to get at least one, and they're going to have door prizes, and you might be able to get other things as well to win there. So if you're in the Midwest, I think it's going to be held in Milwaukee. Carla will have to tell you the dates. Kelly's part of it too. September 24th in Milwaukee. You can participate in that too as well. Jedi says, can we keep the questions for the end? I'm sorry, not being mean, just a question. Sometimes it's possible, Jedi, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes people forget as we go along. So it's a mixture. We do have time for questions at the end too. So I understand your concern. Okay. Any other questions about the novels? Courtney says, question, how do you have time to do the immediate immersion or the other curriculum and also backwards plan from a novel so students can understand 98% of the novel? I know the level ones are based on the high lot are based on high frequency words. That's correct. I do not backwards plan from a novel. Some teachers who do that, that's their entire curriculum, just the novels. They don't do anything else. I find, no problem, Courtney, I find that when I'm teaching high frequency words from immediate immersion or from any curriculum, by the time I get to a novel, they know a lot of the words. Do they know all of them? Absolutely not. But I'm there to help them through those because it's not independent reading yet. Independent reading, you need 98% or better comprehension of the words. If we're reading together as a class, it doesn't need to be that high. So that's what I do. Kelly says, my experience is like Scott's. I don't back plan language for the novels either. There are some people who do. Jason Fritz was one who started. He didn't do it from novels. He did it from popular literature. Other teachers, I know Donna, she does them from novels. Whatever works for you, but they use that as their curriculum. Courtney says, do you do any mini stories pre-teaching to fill in the gaps? Pre-teaching was an old way of doing TPRS. We used to do 7 steps, and one of the steps was to pre-teach all the vocabulary for the week. It was about 10 to 12 words, but I don't pre-teach. I introduce the vocabulary and I put them right to use in the stories right away. And as we get into the course, you'll see how we do that more. Okay, the next part is the lesson slides. And this is going to be your daily thing you're going to be using every single day. Lesson slides are the meat and potatoes of the curriculum. Kelly says, if there's something that I know will come up and be a problem, I might include it in a story before we read. Usually I'm not that organized. I'm with Kelly, the same thing. I'll have to stop and explain a word that's up there. And then I know it's a difficult word, so I'm going to keep asking every time that word comes up. Okay, each lesson has a set of slides. Each lesson is technically a week's worth of slides. Again, for me, it takes me longer than that. It may take you a week or 2 or more to complete a lesson. Remember, it's not a race. Your kids will benefit by you going slowly, I promise. This is how I do this. It's the best way I found to kind of get myself all put together. Elisa says, some of the teacher guides have a vocab preview page so you can glance and introduce those words even that day. Yes, Elisa, I forgot to mention they do. A lot of the novels do have teacher guides that go with them. You purchase them separately, but they have a lot of great content in them. So you get your lesson slides either on the DVD or on the Google Drive. Don't make changes there. You can't on the DVD anyway, and if you save it to your own Google Drive, you can make changes to it there, but I don't recommend that because you lose the original. Make a copy of the lesson to your computer, and I like to place them in a folder for the current school year. So I call mine 2016-17. I put my Spanish 2, or I teach Spanish 2 and Spanish 3 this year. I put them in a folder called Spanish 2 inside that year folder, and I rename them. So I rename them like this week. We have a weird week. Our kids start today, Thursday and Friday, and then our first full week is next week. But I'm going to start with lesson 1. Called this lesson 1, I made a copy, called it lesson 1 2016, and I called it lesson 1A because it's the first week I'm going to work with this lesson. Then during my lesson planning time, I'm going to look through all the slides, make any changes, rearrange the order, add or remove slides as I wish. On a block day, the slides are written for 5-day instruction, but I teach 4 days because I have 2 days that are block. So I combine, my block days are Wednesday, Thursday, so I'll combine the Wednesday, Thursday slides and remove any duplicates out of them. That's how I get my block. If you're always block, I would combine Monday, Tuesday, day 1, day 2, and then day 3, day 4, and then pad your day 5, your Friday. But this is where the versatility comes in, because your slides are going to drive your lessons. And so you want to customize them however you want. Now, there are 2 ways to customize them. The part that's not the same on all the slides, that you can customize just by clicking on it like normal. But part of the slides are templates, and you have to go into your master slide editor to make those changes. You won't be able to do it on the regular slides. PowerPoint and Keynote have master slide editors, but just keep in mind when you change it, it changes on all the slides that use that template for that lesson. It doesn't change it for all of them, but all of them in that file, it changes. So I'll rearrange these during my lesson planning time, and then in class, I just play them. It's like my digital agenda. So the first slide up there, the warm-up, is the first slide that shows up there when kids are coming in my classroom. When we're done with the warm-up, I don't remember what I'm doing. I hit click, and the next slide comes up. Oh, we're doing a song. And that's how it works. And it makes it really easy. You don't have to remember what you're doing. I put a general agenda, usually just with what the main activity is of the day. We're doing a story, we're doing a reading, something like that. But I don't have to put all the nuts and bolts because they're already here. I've already planned them out on the lesson slides. I'm just sliding through. So what am I doing next? I don't know. I just click the slide and it tells me. Any questions on the lesson slides? Okay, I don't see anybody typing. So then we've got the homework. Now, I'll be honest, I don't give homework. But those of you have to, and some of you choose to. If you choose to give homework, Immediate Immersion has it all ready for you. It has Quizlets. Now, remember we talked about the flashcards earlier. This is a digital flashcard program. They update it all the time and add new features. I haven't even looked at it this year to see what new features come. Courtney says, we want to buy the Spanish 2 curriculum now. Will you give us a new one when it comes out? Absolutely, yes. That's why it's been on sale for a while at much more discounted prices, because right now it's in the middle of a rewrite. You're going to get the next one when it comes out. So Quizlet is a website. It's Quizlet.com. It was actually invented by a high schooler years ago. He used it for his own personal purposes and has now made a business out of it. But it's an interactive flashcard app. You can download it for both your iPhone and your Androids. You can get it at your tablets. It's a great thing to put in the classroom and use with your smart boards. And it allows kids to practice a vocabulary in a variety of ways. There is the traditional flashcard way, but they also build in games that the kids like to play with them. Also, there's a way to print, and when you print, you can print it either as a list or as vocabulary cards. So it'll print and then it'll have instructions. It'll say fold it in half and then cut across, and you have the English on one side and then the target language on the other. So it's a great way for them to practice vocabulary. It's free to do this. There are some upgrades. I've never paid for the upgrades on Quizlet. It's been what they've given to me for free has always been sufficient for what I do. Anne says, my students go crazily playing the Quizlet live game. Yes, there's all kinds of games. They keep adding new games to it as well. And we'll demo this later on in the course throughout the year. When we get to that part, we'll show you exactly what all the things it can do. But go on it, get an account, and play with it. See what you can do. The immediate immersion, there are pre-made ones with the immediate immersion vocabulary on them. To find them, search for immediate immersion. We used to have a password, but it was too complicated keeping that straight, so there's no password on them anymore. So you can go in and you can get those for your kids. You can also make your own, and again, it's free for most of the things. The teacher paid accounts allow you to track your students. Yes, Esther, that's correct. Esther says they love the online game. I started using it last year and they begged for it yesterday. Courtney says $50 for a 3-year teacher subscription, at least when I paid. So yes, it's a good deal. I don't assign homework. So for what I use it for, I don't need the benefit of the paid version. But there is a reason to get that if that's something that you do. There are listening and reading assignments in there. So there are stories that they can either hear or read that use the same structures that you're teaching them that week, but in different stories. You can upload these, including the audio files. They're PDF files. You can upload them to your class website, provided it's not publicly available. So if it's open to everybody to come, you can't post them there. But if it's behind a password or in a school intranet or something like that, Google Classroom, Edmodo, that's not publicly open, you can post the files there, and the kids, you can assign them for the kids to do. As I said, I don't assign homework, but I do make all of these available for when students want to do them, or their parents say, what can my student do to better their Spanish or their French or their German or whatever? Or when students are absent, I can assign a lot of these. Because when students are absent, they can hear these stories and read these stories of the same vocabulary that we were working on. Esther, I use Jupyter for my online grades and assignments. Perfect. Maria says, where are the audio story files on Quizlet? No, this is not part of Quizlet. This is a separate thing. It's part of the curriculum. So if you go into the curriculum, there's the homework PDF file that has all the questions and the stories, and then there is a folder with the audio files in there. Now, the Spanish ones, I apologize, they're not native speaker, they are me. But the French ones, Rochelle is a native French speaker. So she's French Canadian, but they are a native speaker there. Any questions on the homework? Jedi says my accent is fine. Thank you, Jedi. I know it's funny when I speak with native speakers, they don't think I'm American right off the bat. But they can't place my accent because it's a Castilian accent, but not a pure Castilian accent. But the first thing they don't think of is that until they see me, that I'm a white guy who learned Spanish. I was able to have that ear for it when I was younger. Okay, I see a couple of people typing. I'll give them a moment. Maria says, now that you're in middle school, does your Espanol 1 curriculum cover 2 years, 1A and 1B? Not for us. We don't teach it that way. We teach all three high school levels at the middle school. We teach level 1, level 2, and level 3. We have them for a full year. We have a modified block. We have them for 4 days a week. And they get a full level 1 in 6th grade, a full level 2 in 7th grade, and a full level 3 in 8th grade, provided they have good enough grades to move on. We do have a requirement that they have at least 80% to move on to the next level. But you could do it over 2 years if you wanted a 1A and 1B, if that's what you wanted. We generally only get to about lesson 10 in our school year, and we don't worry about lessons 11 through 24. We just move on to the next book for the next year. Okay, student assessment. There is a brief explanation of proficiency-based grading in the assessment guide. It is brief. We will treat it more in depth near the end of the course. There are listening, reading, writing, speaking, and culture assessments in there for you. Except for level 1, there are 4 sets of 2 quizzes, formative, and 1 test, summative, for each skill. So for Unit 1, there are 2 listening, 2 reading, 2 culture, 2 writing, 2 speaking quizzes, and then 1 summative assessment that covers all of those. In level 1, however, we don't have any speaking or writing assessments for Unit 1 because that's their silent period. We don't do it until Unit 2. Again, for the listening, the audio are there. So you can use the audio there. If you don't use the audio from there, I highly recommend that you record your own. The transcripts are part of the tests, so you can read it, but I recommend not reading it live to your classes. Here are 2 reasons why. Number 1, you get bored. So if you've read it, now you're at the last class of the day, and you're tired of reading it, so you tend to go much faster than you did for first period. Even though you try not to, it still happens. And 2, if you made a mistake, you slipped a word or a bell or a noise went off, it's different for each class. Now that class has a disadvantage over another class. If you record it, then you can just play it, and it's the same for everybody. But here's the beauty. A kid's absent for a listening test. You don't have to schedule extra time. Tell them, come sit at my desk, put your headphones on, here's the test, do it at my desk, and when you're done, turn it in, and then you can continue teaching the class. So it works really, really well. S says, if you were to assign homework, would you do it during or after lesson? After the lesson. So I've already completed the whole lesson. Now I'm on the next lesson. I will assign the previous lesson's homework. Madeline says, the video keeps cutting out on my computer. I tried Safari, then Google, but have the same problem. Is anyone else having technical difficulties? Shan says, I didn't have to use Internet Explorer. I'm with Chrome. A couple of audio lags, but nothing else. Usually it has to do with your internet speeds. I'm sorry, Madeline, you're having trouble. Maybe your internet speeds may be too slow. Let's see, I'm using Chrome and I'm fine too. I'm fine with Firefox, just a little, but my computer isn't as fast as recommended. So it might be better if you watching the video portion, you can rewatch and get all the sound. I apologize that it's not coming through. Let me type that in here because she doesn't know that. It may. Okay. Any questions on the assessment portion? Okay. Next, there are culture. And there are a total of 8 cultural units in immediate immersion. Some of the cultural units are date specific, so they're holidays, and you can schedule them where they fit. They're not listed in any of the lesson plans because when you start for school, I can't predict when the holiday is going to, fit in. So you're going to have to adjust that yourself. Some people start after Labor Day. Some people start in mid-August like we do. Some people, like our high school, started a week ago already. So I can't really predict. So you have to schedule in your cultural on your own. But the ones that are date specific, you schedule them where they fit in the calendar. And then the other ones that are non-specific and or are holidays that fall outside the school year, like San Fermin for Spanish, they can be taught whenever you see fit. Bastille Day for French. That doesn't have to be that can't be taught in the school year. It happens in the summertime. The lessons are meant to be taught in the target language, but with English elaboration. As you move up the levels, less English is required, but there's no way you can simplify all the complexities of a cultural lesson in the target language and keep it simple. So I do go over the information simply in the target language. So I might say a few sentences about it, ask some questions about it in the target language before I then now elaborate in English. It generally takes me 3 to 5 days to cover a cultural unit. Madeline says, I usually don't have an internet problem, especially on Chrome. I'll check and see what my kids are doing. Okay. Yes, if everybody's online like Netflix or something like that, that can cause problems. Okay, so that's the cultural. And as I said, there are 8 cultural topics per level. You don't have to do all of them. You pick and choose. Alisa says, how many hours in our 3 to 5 days for you? In a 5-day, it's about 3 hours total for me, Alisa. Jadal says, are there additional resources that go with the cultural PowerPoints? They seem kind of short. It depends on which ones. The holiday ones get a little bit more elaborate than ones about sports or food or family, those kinds of ones. But some of them get very elaborate as you move on. I tend to do the school ones, the shorter ones in the beginning of the year where their comprehension is low, and then the more elaborate ones come later on. But in Spanish, Independence Day is coming right around the corner, so that one's unavoidable. And then Day of the Dead comes up. So in the fall, Spanish has a lot of them that come up in level 1. And it depends, Jadal. Sometimes, it doesn't only takes me 2 days because it's a shorter one. And other days because it's longer, it takes me longer than 5. But it's not just presenting the information. You ask lots of repetitive questions about it. Class, when is Day of the Dead? Is Day of the Dead in October 31st or is Day of the Dead on the November 1st and 2nd? Class, what holiday is close but not the same as the Day of the Dead? Was it Halloween or is it Columbus Day? We're asking a lot of those questions, so it's not just going through the slides. It's working with each slide for maybe 5 to 7, maybe 10, 15 minutes to make sure that they're not just going through it, but they're working with it a little bit more. Do you do a family unit as a lesson? I saw that as a cultural PowerPoint. I do that as a cultural thing. I do not teach thematically. Immediate immersion is not based on themes in any way, shape, or form. So I don't teach it thematically. I have a song that teaches family vocabulary, but that does not coincide with when I teach the family as a cultural unit. As says, you can answer this later, but in the French culture folder for celebrations, the PowerPoint is for school. Yes, if you can email me, Esther, I'll double check because that's Rochelle. I'll have to double check. I put everything she gives me in a template, but I don't, my French is not good. It's way old. So if it's a mistake, it's usually mine. So email me and then I will fix it. Okay, so our takeoff sheet is our word for um, our warm up. So in French, and my French pronunciation is going to be off, but it's décollage. In Spanish, it's a despegue, and it's an Abflug in German. Carla says my French is going to be great soon. Yes, it is. Carla's going to tutor me in French over Skype. It's going to be excellent. Thank you, Annette. So this is what it looks like in your language, whatever it is, and it's broken down into each day. They write the goal of the day up here, and then they do the activity. So this is write 3 things that you did over the weekend. I don't care if they're in English or Spanish or French or whatever. They're just so when I call on them to talk about it, they're not going, They have 3 things written down here. On Tuesday, we do, again, they write the goal for the day, and then they're going to write down the name of the book that they read for free voluntary reading. I don't have them do anything else because I don't want to make it a chore. I want them to read for the joy of reading. So I just ask them to write the title down. Wednesday, they write the goal of the day, and then they have a mini quiz. This is a quiz that we take in class. It doesn't count. It's self-graded. I tell them they can use notes, but if they use notes, they should put an asterisk next to it so they know they've got to work on that a little bit more. On Thursday, we do sustained silent reading again. They'll write the goal of the day. They'll write what book they read. And then on Fridays, there is a reflection question. Elisa says, goal of the day, is that from your board? Yes, and it's in the curriculum. Each curriculum, the start of the day has the goal written there for you. It's something that's posted, Carla. They're very generic and they're based off ACTFL. I took the ACTFL standards and I wrote them based on that. So they are like, I can understand and discuss a story. I can understand and discuss a reading. I can engage in conversations. I can compare and contrast American culture with blank culture. So they're like that. I do have, they're in your curriculums. There is a poster folder. Inside there are the targets that you can print out for posters, but they're also on the slide, so they can see that in there. They're kind of like Can Do, but not as specific. They're very generic, and they're based only off the 5 C's. Nothing specific. So I rotate through them. They use them over and over because every time we do a story, the same one, I can understand and discuss a story. Every time we do a reading, I can understand and discuss the reading. Every Monday is conversation day. I can engage in conversations. But it gives them a goal that they can figure out if they can accomplish it at the end. It gives them like a target to think about. On Fridays, there are reflection questions. They're part of the curriculum. I have to teach my kids how to answer a reflection question. The actual answer is not important. It's the explanation behind how they reflect is what's important. And obviously, these are in English, no matter what level. Kathy says, what is the Wednesday question again? It's just a mini quiz. The quizzes are already in the curriculum. You can modify them if you don't like them and change them to whatever you want, but they're just little review things. Over here are comprehension checks. We'll talk about it in just a moment, but this is where at the end of class, they rate their level of understanding of the lesson that day from 0 to 10. 10 meaning they understood 100%, 0 meaning they understood nothing. So I can quickly look, it's kind of like an exit ticket. quickly look here and see how successful my lesson was. If I'm seeing a lot of 8, 9s, and 10s, I'm pretty good here. If I'm seeing a lot of 4, 5, 6s, 7s, there's some problem. And if I'm seeing really low numbers, we've got some bigger problems. But I have a concrete evidence for my administration or for anyone who asks, but mainly for me. It lets me know what my kids understood, and they're quite honest when they fill out this paper because it's not publicly seen. Emily, do students keep these in their folder or do you hold on to them? I see students once a week. I can see them misplacing these. If you see them once a week, you might want to collect them. I collect mine once every 2 weeks. I do this on both sides, so they have 1 week on one side and another week on the other. Yes, Terry, I just glance over them as they leave. As they're filling them out, I'm walking around and looking, but then when I do collect them every 2 weeks, I can look more concretely and see that. And if you have kids who are going to misplace them, you can keep them in a folder for your kids, have them just pull them out at the day and then put them back in there at the end of the day. So the takeoff paper is Immediate Immersion's version of a warm-up paper. I talked a lot about this with the picture, but I'll just go back over it. I print these out double-sided, and students fill them out and turn them in every 2 weeks. Sometimes in the curriculum, forget, I refer to them as the pink paper. That's because I print them on pink paper because I want them to think, ooh, this is important. It's supposed to be red, caution, look, but red you can't print on, doesn't look very good. So it's pink. So anything that's referred to the pink paper, this is it. There is an extra column to the right where students can rate their comprehension after the lesson, 0 meaning they understood nothing, and 10 meaning they understood everything. I also do finger checks, but the problems are kids aren't as honest. Even if you have them close their eyes, they're not as honest when they think someone else can see. This is an excellent informal formative assessment on where individual students are at. So I can say, ooh, these students really need some more help. They're my barometers. I need to work with them a little bit more. I need to pay more attention to them. Or, oh my gosh, yesterday's lesson really did not go over well. None of my kids really understood what was going on. So I need to know I need to rework that. So it's really good for that. And it's just my way of doing an exit ticket without having to keep track of all these tiny little pieces of paper. And I have one nice concrete record. You can use it to make adjustments to your lessons or adjust your week accordingly. Everything's going smoothly, so you might, I meant to say swimmingly, so that you might move a little faster. Oh, now I realize I went too fast because that lesson wasn't a hit. So you can do things like that. The morpheme paper. It looks like this, and on the back is a list of the clues, like a normal crossword puzzle. I have kids write the definition next to the English word on the back, so the English word is given, and they have to write the Spanish word or the French word next to it, and then they fill it in the puzzle. They have to do both sides. These are a list of the morphemes that are in that puzzle, and this is what they mean. This is what's most important to me, as I explain in a moment. So the morpheme idea came from a failing school in San Diego. They came up with 3 school-wide initiatives that every teacher was going to implement in every one of their classes to help get the overall standardized test grades up. One of the things they did was the morphemes. The idea was that teaching individual words isn't as useful as teaching word parts, as word parts apply to many words. We know the standard SAT vocabulary is like 5,000 words. Let's be honest, who's going to remember all those words? But if I teach them, if there's like 38 weeks of school, if I teach them 38 word parts that apply to dozens of words, they have a better chance of remembering 38 morphemes than they do, 180 words for every day of the school year. The morpheme means word part includes roots, suffixes, and prefixes. And although I don't assess my students on the morphemes, they just do the puzzle. The goal is that they know what the morpheme is each week and what it means. I don't care if they remember each individual word. Some of those words are not high frequency, they're just words in the target language that use morpheme. English teachers will love you because this is cross-curricular. The morphemes are English morphemes that also happen to apply in a foreign language. So while you're hitting two stones, you're teaching English with them, which will help them on English standardized tests, and your English teachers will love you, but they're also seeing how they apply in the foreign language. Whenever we read or come across a word that uses a morpheme, whether it's one we've covered or not, I'll point it out. I'll say, class, if you see this, this is a morpheme. I haven't covered this one yet, but it means this. And here are some words, both in English and Spanish, that use that morpheme. I have kids who, after so many years of doing this, like last year we had our third-year kids, they've been doing morphemes for 3 years. They recognize them. They go, didn't we do that one? Doesn't it mean this? Or they'll go, I think this is a morpheme. I see it in a lot of words, but I'm not sure. So they're getting to think about that. And the best thing about these are they can use prior knowledge plus these word parts plus context to decode unknown words. We can't possibly teach them every word in the dictionary. But if we teach them word parts and how to use them to decode words, it vastly expands their vocabulary, even if only passively. Weekend cheat sheet. This is a weekend cheat sheet. I don't know where the idea originally came from. I want to say Jason Fritz, but I'm not positive on that. So whoever made it, I thank you. I've adapted it for the curriculum, and so this is the German version, and it says, Elisa says, yes, it's from Jason Fritz. I've seen Jason use it. Yeah, he used to have a website that it's no longer up anymore. I can't find it, so I had to make my own. So this one says, I did, I went, I played, and it gives them some ideas. Not everything's here. It's not an exhaustive list. But it helps, especially in level 1, kids to formulate some ideas. And then I just have kids add things that they do frequently that aren't on here. Like, I didn't have room up here to play video games. So the kids who write video games, who play video games a lot, I have them write it in over here on this side. So they can use this all year long. Okay, basically talked all about that. Okay, this has proven most helpful in level 1 or to scaffold the activity for lower ability students. So my kids really use this. That Monday when we write down what you did over the weekend, they take this paper out and they can use it to help them out. The language pledge. There's a language pledge that I adapted from Middlebury, and it's a pledge I make. I sign first and all my kids sign after me. And it says, in signing the language pledge, I understand that the majority of class will be conducted in Spanish, except explanations and important announcements, and I further agree to use Spanish as my primary language of communication during class. In rare situations where English is required, I'll raise my hand and ask, Permíteme hablar en inglés? May I speak in English? I understand that it is also my responsibility to help my teacher stay in Spanish as much as possible, except explanations and important announcements. If I catch him or her not using Spanish when he or she is supposed to, I'll receive an extra participation point towards my participation grade. I understand that complying with this pledge may lead to a greater participation and/or speaking grade in class, and failure to comply with this pledge may result in the lowering of my participation and/or speaking grade. So that's what the pledge looks like. And it's just an adaptation of Middlebury's language pledge. And I, along with my students, make a commitment to speak the target language as much as possible. And we post this on the wall so everybody can see. I put it in one of those page protectors, hang it on my wall, and let everybody know this is what I do. This is our commitment as a class together. In your curriculum, do you explain how you do your participation grades? I do, and it's actually not a grade. We'll talk about that. It comes up. We'll talk about it. It's not a grade, though. The free write paper, you won't be getting into this in level 1 until like November-ish at the very earliest, but for everybody else, it'll come up really soon. This is what it looks like in Spanish. There's a French and a German version. They write their name and the date up here. They write the number of the writing. If it's the first writing, the second writing, the third writing, the fourth writing, here. And they write how much time was given. So if it's the first writing, it's 10 minutes. If it's the 19th writing, it may be closer to 7 minutes, or it might be 6 minutes. They will write one word per blank, except for proper nouns. No matter how many words proper nouns are, they must squeeze onto one word. So Taco Bell gets one line, not two. Jingleheimer Schmidt, whatever that name is, that must squish on one line. They don't get multiple words for that. And this helps them count the words. Because if they wrote to here, they got one word short of 50, and they can write at the top of their paper 49 and see that right away. Shannon says, let's see, wait. Courtney says, you could blow it up and make a quill and have it be serious, decorative piece in your room. You definitely could, Courtney. Get a calligraphy pen and have them do that. That would be a great idea. I just want them to take it seriously, that this is something that we do in our class. So starting the first week for levels 2 and up, and in week 10 or so in level 1, I have students do a weekly free write. We'll talk more about them later on. I set the timer for 10 minutes to start, and students write until the time is up. Now they're writing a story, no English. They write only one word per blank unless it's a proper noun, and then all the words must be written on the same blank if it's a proper noun. When the class average hits 100 words, I'll drop the time by 30 seconds the next week, with the goal being that we hit 5 minutes before the end of the school year. I choose at random 2 of these per student to grade for a quiz grade. And the students do not know which ones I'll grade in advance. They don't even know how many I'm going to grade. I just know it's only 2. It's all I have time for. And we'll talk more about grading them later, but basically, I'm grading on how comprehensible it is and how complex it is. And that's it. And we'll talk more about that later in the course. So here's the new format and structure. The French one will eventually go through a rewrite once French 3 is finished. So French 1 does not follow this format, but I highly recommend that you adapt it to this because it works a little bit better. We experimented one way with our first edition, and then teachers told us quickly they wanted us to do it a different way, and so we made a change. Courtney says, have you ever done the free writes earlier in the year? I want to try it soon, but not for a grade, to have a baseline for me and them. If it's level 1, I would not. It's forcing output way too early. I would not. Use your November one as a baseline. Right now, we have to give us in my previous school, I had to give a what do you call it? A test. And it freaks kids out in level 1 because they don't know any language. So I just tell them on theirs just to write any words you know in Spanish, even if, and I don't tell them, but I mean, it may only be taco that's up there. Yes, I don't want to raise their effective filter, Shannon says. Elisa says, I tried with my 4th graders. It didn't make anyone feel good. No, I wouldn't recommend doing it early. Use your first one that happens later in the year as your benchmark, because there's going to be a huge improvement by the end of the year. I make a copy of my kids' first one of the year and the last one of the year, and we compare them. I also have them, when I taught them level 1, I saved their first one, and when I have them in level 3, we compare it with their last one in level 3. So I would just wait and use that one later. For levels 2 and 3 and above, they're going to write that first week, and I use that as my baseline. And in level 1, you know their baseline is going to be better because they don't know anything and they stress out. So I just tell them, write down, this is not a free write. This is just my pretest that my old school required. I told them, just write down any word that you know in Spanish and we'll use that. My school really wanted me to give them a listening, reading, speaking, writing quiz. You want to see heart attacks in freshman year? That's what was going to happen. Kelly says, oops, I got here up here. Carla says, I do free writes in English after they talk to a partner for 3 minutes about their favorite story or TV show. This is so we can understand the process and see how fast they write in English. Some only 50 words in 5 minutes in English. I never thought of trying that. It's a good idea, Carla. Thank you for sharing. Kelly says, I keep the first one and give it back with the last one. It's cool, especially in upper levels when they don't always notice their increased proficiency. Exactly. Wendy, sometimes I give a prompt, sometimes I don't. The prompts are in the curriculum, and we'll talk more about the free writes in more detail later on. But yeah, it really, last year I had my first 3s that went with me from 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade. And so I didn't have all those kids in 6th grade, but I took their 6th grade ones of the kids I did have and showed them that with their last year in Spanish 3, and they were like blown away with what they could do. So here's the new format. We're starting with personal conversations. In the original Spanish and what French 1 says now, it says the personal conversations 1 day a week. And it takes you about 4 or 5 weeks to get through all of that. Teachers said they didn't like that. So we went back with the original idea that for the first 2 weeks, we're going to do personal conversations. Each curriculum has a topic what to talk about. So I would just do that for 2 weeks before I start the rest of the curriculum. That's what I recommend. The new Spanish 1, the French 2, the Spanish 2 is all written that way, but the original French is not. Then it goes into 5 to 6 weeks of focusing on the superverbs. The superverbs were an idea by Terry Waltz and Oliver Genius, and the idea comes from her being an interpreter, and the idea of simplifying complex ideas to the simplest common denominator. So they originally come from Mandarin, and Mandarin has these, I don't know what they call them in Mandarin, we're going to go states of being, I guess. Existence, identity, location, volition, possession, motion, and preference. So, except for Spanish, there are 6 verbs that we focus on. In Spanish, we have 2 ises, but everything else, that's why I have them 2 here. But for everyone else, it's 6 words. You don't need an extra is in there for location. But these, if the kids really know these well, they can communicate most of their basic ideas. They have to make these words their own, and they'll be able to communicate complex ideas. They don't know needs, but they know wants, and that's close enough. They don't know flies or walks or runs, but they know goes, and that's close enough for them to be able to get by and have some survival language that is not from a phrase book, but that they can create themselves. So these superverbs will be repeated at each level with a new level of complexity to keep it novel. So they're repeated in level 2 and then in level 3 because as it gets more complex, the meanings don't change, but the formations of the verbs do, at least in the European languages. After we've gotten those, then the rest of it is all based on high frequency vocabulary. And level 1 is the top 100 words, and level 2 is up to. Doesn't always get to the full 200, but it's up to the top 200 words. They're not taught in order. They're taught in which ones went together best. But they are, all the ones in level 1 are in the top 100. If you find errors, and I'm sure you will, because I know Rochelle for French, I'm letting you know right now, even the French, the DVD, she went through it again. She's gone through it hundreds of times. She wrote it 2 years ago. She's found even more errors in there. Some of the errors are my fault, especially if they're Spanish there, because in the template I forgot to change it from Spanish to French. But some of the errors are her own, and she's a native speaker, and she's finding them. So she gave me a list. I haven't had time to work on them yet. I will. Everybody will get those updates for free. They don't have to pay for those. But if you find errors, please let me know, and we can make it better that way. We're all human, so let me know. Especially in the Spanish, I'm not a native speaker, so if you're a native speaker of Spanish and you see, ooh, that's not how we say something, please let me know. My feelings will not be hurt. I want it to be the best curriculum possible. Have ideas to add to the curriculum. In the Spanish one, someone wanted the readings that were only on PowerPoints. They wanted them in a file. So I made a reading PDF with reading and comprehension questions for all of the readings in the curriculum. That was a suggestion by another teacher, so I added that in there. So if you have ideas, please share. This is a growing document that we can keep making better and better and better. So you can email me your errors at for immediate immersion at teachforjune.com. And if you have any ideas to make it better, you can email me the same place, at teachforjune.com. With that, that is the introduction and curriculum. Does anybody have any questions or comments before we end this evening? We got out about a half an hour early. That's not too bad. While you're formulating that, let me just check when our next date is, because it's next week already. I know I have back to school night next Thursday, so it won't be next Thursday. So I highlighted it in red when I emailed it to you. Our next class will be on next Wednesday, the 24th, at the same time. And this is starting the year off right. So it's going to talk to you how to do your first days, which is going to be that personalization part that I just talked about. Spending that 2 weeks on that personalization, that's what we're going to be talking about next week. Okay, lots of questions. Let me scroll up because they're coming too fast at me here. Bear with me a moment. Okay, stop scrolling here, computer. Okay, I found some of the rubrics where it still says Hispanic instead of Francophone or Spanish instead of French, and since they were PDFs, I can't change the rubrics. Just email me and I'll fix them and I'll re-upload them and send them out to everybody. Just email me, please. Next, let's see. Everything my computer is not scrolling the way I want. Emily says, no thank you. Thank you, Scott. Allison says, where will I find the personalized questions in the French curriculum? They show up in the actual lessons under the lesson plan. So they're right after the lesson plan. It'll talk about the song, and then there'll be personalized questions that are there. Lynn says, will we get a certificate of completion? You absolutely will. I'm anticipating whether we hit 50 or not, it's going to be for a minimum of 50. If we go over 50, then I'll adjust that, but I know I'm going to write it for 50 at the very minimum. Technically, it's going to be about 48, but I figure with time that if you watch any videos on your own time, or you email me questions, or you participate on the board, that's extra time. So I'm going to at least give you 50 hours, and I send them out at the end of the year when we're finished. If you need it beforehand, I can give you one that covers the hours up to that point. Okay, Jadai says, opinion, I have a summative assessment at the end of the year that is not grammar focused, smiley face, but the focus was textbook vocab. Will this program help meet those district goals? It depends on the textbook vocab. If it's all non-frequent vocabulary like swing set and slide, this isn't going to help you. However, I had a textbook test I had to give that had all that dumb vocabulary on it, and Blaine convinced me to give up the textbook and just use his curriculum, which did not have that vocabulary in it, and my kids did okay on the grammar portion, but they vastly beat out the kids who got the textbook with all that vocabulary on the listening and reading and speaking and writing. So even though they didn't know all of the words, they didn't know the word for swing set or for slide, they still knew enough to be able to do well on the assessment. What I would do is what Ben Slavic does, work with this curriculum, and then just give them lists of words that are not in the curriculum that they have to just study on their own. They're not going to do any worse than the textbook kids are. Elisa says, are the story scripts appropriate for elementary students, or are they about teens, dating, cars, etc.? I don't have a lot of dating in there. Is some, at least in the Spanish one, there is some, but not a heck of a lot. The most thing for elementary is that it has more characters than it should. Elementary should limit to one character, one main character, and then a whole bunch of fluff characters, kind of like the Little Red Hen. She's the only developed character. Everybody else is just a fluff character. So you might simplify them, but at least the ideas are there for you to work off of. Kim says, thanks, I just got back from vacation yesterday. I was feeling pretty glum about starting school this week. I was too, and I started last week. I'm excited again. Glad to hear that, Kim. Kelly says, boo, I have soccer next week, so I'll have to catch it offline. We'll miss you, Kelly. Lynn says, is enrollment still open if someone? Yes, enrollment's still open all year long, and that's another beauty of us recording the classes. They won't miss any. They can go back and watch the classes. And let's see. Back up here. I ordered the curriculum online last week, but have not received it. Will it arrive as a DVD or Google Doc? Maria, which edition did you order? If it was French one or Spanish one, it comes on a DVD, and it should be here to you this week. It usually gets mailed by my distributor within 24 to 48 hours. If you email me, I can get you the tracking. The system usually emails it out, but some people don't get that email. Kim says, today was my first day and my first time ever circling. It went quite well, but I wish I had more ideas for tomorrow. And next week. If you read through the curriculum, Kim, it will be there. There are instructions how to start your day. We're just going to go over them in more elaboration next week. Courtney says, what do you do with the certificates of completion hours? Some people can get salary boosts at their district. Some people get recertification through their state. It just depends. Every state has different requirements of what they need. Like in California, to get your preliminary credential, you need 150 hours of professional development, or you can take classes and get credit. A lot of people do things like this because it's easier to get the 150 hours of professional development. Carla says, can you please send a sample of the certificate so I can show to my admin? Yes, just email me, Carla, because I will forget otherwise. Irene says, does level 1 curriculum go up to lesson 14 only? The index says there are 21 lessons, but I only see 14. Level 1 in Spanish or French? It should be 24 lessons total in both Spanish 1 and French 1. Jedi says, sweet. Esther says, back to school night for my kiddo. Thanks so much. You're welcome. Jedi says, Scott, thank you so much for all you do. I have to go tonight. Cheers. Good night, Jedi. Have a good one. Elisa says, fabulous. Thanks so much. I can see how this has been an incredible labor of love on your part and a huge contribution to the field. Thank you so much, Elisa. Spanish 1. So Spanish 1, it should have come on a DVD. It should be there this week. Maria, if you send me an email, I'll find the tracking information and send it to you. You're welcome, Terry. Irene says Spanish, there should be 24, so double check your information. Make sure you're looking at the 2016 edition. If you're looking at an older edition, that could be why. Leslie says, I thought I read that it's possible to receive credit from Pacific University for this class. Am I remembering correctly? You can. It's a separate fee payable to them, and then there's some extra coursework you have to do. And you can go to my website and go under services, and it says credits. So you can there, and it gives you all the instructions of what you need to do and the costs. But that's payable directly to the University of Pacific. Courtney says you have to write 3 single-spaced pages of lesson plans per unit. That's roughly it to get a unit. It's about 3 pages of typing. It doesn't always have to be lesson plans. It's basically how you intend to use what you learn. And you technically can get a lot of credits because you can do, because this goes for so long, you can do multiple times. Elise says, the new computers in our district have no disk drives. Can we get the Spanish one on a Google Doc? If you email me, Elisa, yes, I can. I know our district went to the diskless ones too, but we still use the DVDs. So on Amazon for like $18, you can get a DVD drive that plugs into the USB. Just a hint for like playing DVDs for movies. Annie says, thanks, Scott. I may not be on live next week, but I look forward to listening to that one and seeing you the following week. Great, Annie. Looking forward to sticking with you. Especially because I didn't get to see you this year. You guys were in Agen. I'm probably mispronouncing that. You're very welcome, Tammy. Have a good night. Carla says, so much fun, Scott. You rock. Thank you so much. So do you, Carla. Formidable. Lynn says, good night and see you next week. I'll see you next week, Lynn. Beatriz, thank you, Scott. I will be flying back to the U.S. next Wednesday, but I'll make sure I'll watch the video. Leslie says, good night, all. Good night. Danielle, I'm so excited to continue this. Thank you. Courtney says, thank you. Have a good first weekend. I can't wait, Courtney. Kim says, cannot believe you had the energy to do this after your first day of class. Neither can I. I am home. I'm in my office, but I'm exhausted and can't wait to go to bed, actually. Elizabeth says, thanks. See you next week. Anne says, bon weekend. Annie says, yes, it was fun to be at Agen, but I missed NTPRS. I know. I would love to be able to get to Agen one year. And hopefully, after Carla tutors me, my French will be up to par. Shannon says, thank you. I have a question that I'll post in the post-class discussion later. Great, Shannon. Appreciate that. Lynette says, thanks. Looking forward to working on this throughout the year. Annie says, do it. I know. It just seems like such a wonderful opportunity, and I love those European people over there. You know, they didn't come to NTPRS this year, so I missed them. Plus, I've never been to France, so that'll be nice to see that as well. Been to Europe plenty of times, but France has never been part of it. Okay, then with that, it looks, oh, wait, maybe there's someone else. Oh, Elisa says, buenas noches, Elisa. Anne says, I already dove in lesson 1, day 1 today, and it went well. Thanks for the support through these webinars. You're very welcome, Anne. I'm glad it went well for you. Let us know. Put it on the post discussion there. Let us know how it went. So with that, I'll say good night with everybody. Everybody have a good weekend, and I will see you next Wednesday.